We know that rocks are being thrown. We know that bricks are being thrown. We know that our officers have been placed in harm's way, and we know that 7 of them have been injured, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that another officer isn't. So again, you're going to see us use appropriate measures like tear gas and pepper balls.
Time once again to open the doors to another edition of the Arena, one that is forced to begin with a city under siege and questions about not why it happened, but why it was allowed to fester and explode. So let's get to it. She is the veteran CNBC contributor and New York Times best-selling author, Carol Roth, joined by the adjunct journalism professor at Marymount College and Seton Hall University, Dorian Davis. I thank you both for joining us. And Dorian, I must say, it was wonderful of you to dress for the Arena today. It is you are the first one in the history of this show to actually come in a bow tie, well, except for Peter Morisi, but he always does it. And I have to ask, so are you going somewhere after the show?
No, this is a fashion debut for me. It's my first bow tie ever, and I wore it just for you today.
Okay, Carol, I got to tell you, the man is just resplendent. He's looking good. It makes me... Okay, Carol,
and sometimes I wear the actual tie, but I haven't done the bow tie yet. I feel like he's bested me here. I'm going to have to pull that out next time.
I just don't. I'm going to have to really work on the wardrobe now. Thanks, Dorian. You shamed me. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get started. Unfortunately, we have to get started seriously here for what's happened in Baltimore right now because they are finally in the process of cleaning this up. But, Dorian, I'm going to start with you first on this. The thing that still sticks in my craw and the craw of so many people is the mayor of Baltimore, Stephanie Rawlings Blake, who is now trying to back off this statement that she made. She's trying to pull it back. But she basically said we wanted to give those who wished to destroy the space to do that, calling it freedom of speech. Stop me a moment here. Freedom of speech to destroy buildings and homes?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on today. It was a very bizarre statement that she made over the weekend, but I am going to give her, because it was so strange, I am going to give her the benefit of the doubt here and say that, yes, she's the mayor of a major American city, but she's never dealt with a crisis, and neither has the current governor. She's never dealt with a crisis that has risen to the national consciousness like this one has, and she's never dealt with the national media, and I think it's entirely possible that she misspoke here, and that's the only logical explanation I can come up with.
Yeah, is that, and I get the explanation here, but don't you think in some ways, Dorian, that's a little bit of an excuse? I mean, it's an old saying that I always use, if you want to play lumberjack, you got to learn to handle your end of the log. Well, she's playing lumberjack here as mayor, and somebody really gave her some awful advice that could have got somebody killed.
It's true. It has been amateur hour to some extent in the response, at least over the weekend up until Monday when the National Guard finally got called to the crisis in Baltimore. But again, there's no reason that the mayor of Baltimore or the governor of Maryland would have experience managing a crisis like this. This is a unique crisis like the one we saw in Ferguson, but unlike anything we've seen coming out of Baltimore or Maryland in my lifetime.
Carol, what I get here too, and I want to have you answer that, but what I get here as well from talking to a lot of people in law enforcement I know is these are cops right now who are not being allowed to do their job, the ones that are properly trained to do it, and a lot of cops are afraid to do their job now because of the current culture that we're in.
No, you're absolutely right, Ed. And I have to say, to say that this is a completely unique situation, it's not. We've seen riots for all kinds of reasons, from something as silly as a team not winning or winning to the situation in Ferguson. But to say that she hasn't been in this situation before, there is no situation that I can think of where it would ever be okay to say to just destroy somebody else's property. I mean, that is completely an utterly ridiculous statement. And while I'm willing to give somebody a pass, to say that you should be able to destroy something fundamentally makes no sense. And not only that, just the mentality of the people who are doing this. I'm upset because I feel wronged, so I'm going to burn my own house down. It just, the whole thing completely reeks of just nonsensical lack of leadership, lack of respect.
Well, we've been here before too, Carol. I mean, it's not as if we've seen this is the first rodeo here, the first instance that this has happened. I mean, look, I go back to Martin Luther King Jr. Day in 1989 in Miami in a place called Overtown where they almost burned that community to the ground. That's 1989, and we're still doing it in 2015. That's got to say something about someone in our society.
It does. It says that the foundation of community is broken, and it says the foundation of leadership on both a national and a local level is broken. And to think that people think that this is acceptable behavior in their own community for their neighbors, and then from the people at the top to not completely condemn this action is complete lunacy. I cannot believe that this is still happening, like you said, in 2015 in the United States of America. It's very saddening.
And I got to tell you that as a newsman, I've been watching this kind of video for 30 years plus, and this actually even took me by surprise, some of the absolute violence that was coming out of that. So the mayor, I think, has a lot to apologize for when we get down to the end of this. All right, stand by, both of you here. We're going to take a break, come back on the other side, and when we do, we mention that the Supreme Court is now hearing the arguments on gay marriage. They're ready to issue a ruling. But we also have to talk about the fact that the Pope is getting involved in climate change, of all things. That and so much more when we continue right here on The Arena, right here on MidPoint. Back to MidPoint and The Arena. CNBC contributor, New York Times bestselling author Carol Roth, and the adjunct journalism professor at Marymount Manhattan College and Seton Hall University, Dorian Davis. All right, Carol, we come to you first. The Supremes are working today inside the Beltway at Washington, D.C. We're getting ready to hear, hopefully sometime soon, not today, but in the next few weeks, about their decision on same-sex marriage. Carol, is it time for basically Republicans or those who are against same-sex marriage to just, and I know people are going to bristle at this when I say it, but just to let it go? You've lost in many cases, and the Supreme Court is very likely going to rule that same-sex marriage is law of the land.
I do think it's time for them to let it go. I'm pro same-sex marriage, and I think if you're somebody who is a fan of small government and the government not getting involved in your life, that this is something that you should be okay with. If you want to believe something different in your church and in your community, then power to you. But just have the government stay out of it altogether, and then you don't come out looking like a hypocrite. And frankly, you widen your base. So I think it ends up being a win-win for all around.
Dorian, is that reality, though? Because even though people will say that, okay, you've lost it, the Supreme Court will go ahead and likely they will okay same-sex marriage, this fight will continue because, let's be very honest, there are many people here, very religious-based, faith-based, who simply believe that this is the wrong thing to do. They're not going to give this up.
The fight will continue in the same way that the fight continued after the Supreme Court ruling on issues like segregation and abortion. You see where the public wind is blowing already. Hillary Clinton, there's an infographic available online that shows you how Hillary Clinton's position on this issue has evolved as public sentiment has evolved since 2008. And you see all the Republican candidates now kind of scrambling to find some balance between their conservative base, satisfying their conservative base on this issue, and also reaching out to independent voters. I don't think there will ever be a president again, starting in 2016, who is opposed to gay marriage. And for that reason, I agree with Carol. I think it's time for Republicans to dump it and move on.
Can you satisfy that conservative base, though, Dorian, and still hold to those religious tenets?
We are living in a two-party system, and so the options are pretty limited. And if one party stands for freedom economically and socially, and another party stands for economic freedom, this would be the Republicans, but refuses to accept gay marriage and social justice, then I think a lot of independent voters are going to start gravitating toward Democrats. So the Republicans, in order to make themselves viable going forward, I think have got to start making the party more inclusive. And one step to that would be to drop hot-button social issues like this one.
Do you think Republicans could win the 2016 election without having the LGBT community behind them and have that sort of vote in their corner? Can they win?
Yes, of course. The LGBT vote, there's a lot of controversy as to how big it actually is. Some people say 3 million, some people say 10 million. Regardless, I think it's possible for a GOP candidate to win without it. However, supporting same-sex marriage indicates to the public that one is progressive and that one is inclusive. And I think there's a psychological component here. If a candidate runs on the Republican side and he's opposed to same-sex marriage, people are going to perceive that as being stuck in the past. And I think that's going to hurt the GOP going forward.
And I don't even think you need to support it as a candidate. I think you just need to not be against it. I think if you are a strong leader and you explain to to the conservatives that this is something that you deal with in your community, and we're going to leave religion out of the government, and we're going to go back to small government, and we do believe that communities are the best place to sort out issues anyway, then I think that a person can have whatever beliefs that they want, but still believe that the government should be small and not interfering in people's lives. And you just need to have the right candidate to be able to deliver that message.
The right candidate. There we go. 60 seconds before we take a break. Come back for the final segment. But to you, Carol, first, the Pope is preaching about the need to protect the earth and all of creation. He's basically going against, he's stepping up on climate change here. And there's conservatives in this country who are just scared to death that the Pope's getting involved.
This is a Scooby-Doo moment for me. It's where I go, like, what's going on here? Why is the Pope talking about climate change? I fundamentally don't understand this. It's certainly not in his wheelhouse. I'm not sure that it's in anybody's wheelhouse. We can't even tell what the weather is going to be tomorrow. We all know that the climate does change, but to say that we have any sense of knowledge of how we're impacting it, I think is pretty far-fetched. And I just fundamentally don't understand why he's getting involved with this here.
30 seconds, Dorian. The Pope getting involved in climate change. Do you think it's something that he really doesn't need to get involved in? Is this out of his wheelhouse?
It's out of his wheelhouse. The Pope is not a scientist for sure, but this is an opportunity, I think, for the Catholic Church to take a public leadership role on an issue that tens of millions of people care about. And whether he's an expert or not is probably for his constituency to decide. But it's a positive effort by the Catholic Church to change the world, and I think that's a good thing.
By the way, I don't know about you guys, but I'm looking forward to actually skiing in Colorado in August. So, I mean, all the
I'm
climate...
just looking forward to a nice winter in Chicago, so bring on the global warming.
No, you're stuck with bad winters in Chicago forever. There you go. Stand by. We're right back to close out the arena after this. Bonus time now into the fray. CNBC contributor, New York Times bestselling author Carol Roth, and the adjunct journalism professor at Marymount Manhattan College and Seton Hall University. I know those places well. Dorian Davis joins us. All right, Dorian, to you first here. A few things that we have. This is a little frightening. Texas is set to execute by lethal injection a man convicted in the killing of a prison guard back in 1999. They're expected to do it today, 6 p.m. Central Time. But the DNA tests aren't back yet. And also, neither his blood nor his fingerprints were found on the murder weapon, nor was any of the victim's blood found on Pruitt. This is a little scary here, especially when we consider that we've just come out of a news cycle where we found out that some people may have been put to death with incorrect DNA evidence.
I was stunned when I read the facts of this case. There is no forensic case against this gentleman. Now, that doesn't mean he's innocent.
Right.
But the case that the prosecution apparently used to convict him was a torn-up demerit that the officer had written and was apparently on his person at the time his body was found. It's very bizarre. It doesn't seem like it would meet the burden of evidence for a prison sentence, much less for a death penalty case. And this is the kind of case that makes people, I think, seriously question the death penalty, because once he is executed, and I believe he's already had one stay denied, once he's executed, we can't go back and determine we were wrong.
Well, that's the biggest thing here, Carol, because look, this guy was no choir boy here because he was already serving a life sentence in the killing of a neighbor at age 15, and then he was convicted of this stabbing of the correctional officer. But still, you've got to do everything you can to get it right, especially when you have the science to at least do it. Takes a couple of days. Go ahead, take the days, but don't kill somebody who's innocent or not guilty of a crime.
Yeah, you gotta give it up to Texas. God bless Texas. But
I knew you were going to bring Texas. I knew you were going to do that.
Timing from a PR standpoint is just off here, and I think given all the things that have been happening in the news around DNA testing and just around even the police treatment of prisoners and of potential people committing crimes, I don't think that this is great time. You know, what's a few days in the grand scheme of things? But at the end of the day, he was serving a life sentence, and you know, it does sometimes come down to an economic decision, right? You know, what's costing the taxpayer more dollars? he's not getting out anyway. And certainly, as you said, is no choir boy. But, if the DNA testing is coming back in a couple days, seems to me you wait the couple days.
All right, let's go to something else here, because now you just mentioned Texas, and I know you're probably going to take a shot at Arizona too, seeing as the next story comes from the Phoenix area. And I find it interesting. The Valley Metro, which is their transit system there, they're pulling sexually explicit ads from their light rail system. This is from a company called My Sister's Closet. It's a consignment store chain, and they have signs like "Make a booty call" with a black cowboy boot alongside the words. They have another with a chest of drawers next to the text, "Buy a bigger chest," or "Wanted one night stand." Now, okay, I can see where some people would be upset, but come on, Carol, isn't this just double entendre giggles here?
The only thing I'm upset about is that I didn't come up with these. I think that they're absolutely genius. To have a nightstand and say "wanted one night stand" is incredibly clever and very funny.
But wait a minute, some people say that it's wrong, though. Some people say it's too suggestive, and you've got to... Now, people are going to say it's around kids and it's around adults. It shouldn't be done. It shouldn't be in public.
And the kids and most of the adults aren't going to understand it anyway. I think that this is one where it is clever. They're not showing anything that is sexually explicit. This is a funny play on words. It's incredibly clever, and I think that they're completely out of their minds if they think that this is what being sexually explicit is, especially when there's a Hooters probably down the street from them.
Yeah, it's funny how you bring that up, because I had somebody send me a note today, and they said, "Aren't there Hooters all over the country? And what do you think that is? It's not just an owl with a good set of eyes."
Right.
Dorian, are people just here? Is this just a knee-jerk again, or is this just one or two people who basically are setting the standard for everybody in society?
This is another example of American Puritanism. I agree with Carol 100%. First of all, a small child is not going to understand a one-night stand joke. And secondly, one-night stand, as it is presented in this ad, is not sexually explicit anyway. It's a fun ad. And I hate that we are veering sometimes toward this puritanical, boring, dull, dowdy society where we can't do anything remotely edgy lest it possibly offends.
You're going to see a lot more suggestivism than something like this.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go to primetime television, it's there. And what are you going to do at that point? I mean,